Rejected, throwing away, affected. I don't know what to say. Ejected, cast out to the sea, disconnected. They didn't want me.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Nicksmissal III. We're rounding out the series with a discussion of one of the worst movies of all time. I'm Patricia and I'm here with Admin James.
Here, I do not want to go through with this, Patricia.
I don't want to go through it either, but we have no other choice. So today we're going to be discussing about, as stated earlier, the canceled sequels of the Last Airbender movie.
Oh, it hurts. Oh, my brain hurts from even hearing the mention of that movie.
Yeah. For the two of you who don't know what we're talking about, The Last Airbender was a live-action adaptation of the Avatar: The Last Airbender TV series. And many people considered it to be one of the worst movies of all time, let alone possibly the worst Nickelodeon movie based off of one of their programming. Even worse than Rugrats Go Wild, and that is saying something.
At least with that, at least there was somewhat of an excuse compared to this, because basically it was a TV special turned into a movie, much like the first Hey Arnold movie. This had no love or effort put into it whatsoever.
Yeah, and apparently, M. Night Shyamalan wanted to do this movie for his kids because his kids were such a massive fan of the series that he decided, you know what, I'm going to do an adaptation of this movie. And yeah, everybody knows about the name mispronunciations, the exposition dumps, and telling the story verbatim from the TV series, at least up into the first book, which is Water, which many people consider to be the less, I would say it's like the least out of the 3 seasons of Avatar. I mean, not to say that the book 1 was bad, it's just that books 2 and 3 elevated book 1 into something so amazing. Like, I've already mentioned this so many times, but I guess I could mention it again, that when this show came out in 2005, I was in my sophomore year in college, and this was like around my prime anime phase and video game phase when I was hanging out with my gaming group friends at Wolvolution, and this is one of the many shows that we would talk about alongside with other anime that was huge at the time, like Naruto and Bleach and a whole bunch of others that came out. And I cannot tell you about how every single episode of Avatar, when it came out, everybody was so excited and wanted to see more. So yeah, it's interesting because if the rumor was true about M. Night Shyamalan, like when he first started doing The Sixth Sense, apparently, and again, this is rumor, so it's not 100% confirmed, but apparently, the story of Sixth Sense, M. Night Shyamalan apparently was inspired of that story from one of the episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Really?
The episode was called The Tale of the Dream Girl. It's about this kid named Johnny who he's talking with his sister, and everything just seems a little bit strange to him. It's like everywhere around him, nobody's speaking to him, nobody's interacting with him, everybody's just pretty much ignoring him, and he keeps getting haunted by this girl that he doesn't know who she is. He starts finding out some more information about this girl when he puts on a ring that was found on his locker, and he starts seeing hallucinations of her, and she keeps calling his name, Johnny, Johnny, please come find me, let's be together. And, shock, shock, surprise, surprise, if you've never seen the episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, then cover thy ears until we continue on with the podcast. It turns out that girl who has been haunting him that entire time was his girlfriend who died in a car accident. And it turns out that Johnny is also dead, and the sister was the only person who was able to see him. So yeah, Johnny had been dead the entire time. And the whole purpose of the girlfriend coming back was that, she can't fully rest in peace until Johnny comes back for her. And so Johnny gets his memories back, And so he walks back with her, and he completely is gone. And, apparently, according to the rumors, that was where, M. Night Shyamalan got a little inspiration of The Sixth Sense, in which, it's about a kid who sees dead people, and he talks to the psychiatrist who's played by Bruce Willis, and then it turns out that, the reason why, the kid can be able to see, the Bruce Willis character was because he's a ghost, too. So, yeah.
South Park parodied that episode once.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, because Sixth Sense, when that movie first came out, it, blew the entire world, and everybody was making parodies of it. I think that, even Final Fantasy X wanted to consider doing a similar story in that realm, but then when Sixth Sense came out, they had to change the story completely. And, it's kind of funny, because my sister, she had never seen The Sixth Sense before, and we saw the movie together a few months ago, and she already knew about the twist ending. And so when she watched the movie for the first time, knowing about the twist ending, she's like, what's so special about this? And then I told her, well, the thing that was special about this was that the twist ending. And it's like, well, if it wasn't for the twist ending, then this movie is nothing special. And I was like, fair point. Anyway, but now that we're, done with M. Night Shyamalan's supposed inspiration for The Sixth Sense, let's get back to The Last Airbender. Okay, so yeah, it's been on and off over the past couple of years that M. Night Shyamalan really wanted to do the continuation of Avatar: The Last Airbender in The Last Airbender 2. Last September, there was even an article stating that, yes, M. Night Shyamalan is considering on doing that Last Airbender 2, but as of the time of this recording, there has been no new article stating on that. So we don't know if it was sidelined or if it was canceled again. Yeah.
Let it stay dead.
Yeah, hopefully it stays dead. So, from the ending of The Last Airbender, we were first introduced to Azula, and this is basically in the part of, the ending of the first book, in which Azula is being sent to capture the Avatar because Fire Lord Ozai is getting sick and tired of the constant failure of Iroh and Zuko of capturing him. So, it would have most likely been the continuation of where the movie left off. Continue on with Book 2, in which Aang needs to find an earthbending teacher. We're getting introduced to Toph, and then as time goes on, Aang starts to learn earthbending. We're introduced to the other characters, and then, of course, we would be introduced to the Earth Kingdom. We would get to know more of the Earth Kingdom and eventually go to Ba Sing Se, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, what would have happened if this movie would have came out by some miraculous thing? It's like, yeah, the movie did come out and it was a massive failure, but hey, let's try again. We have 2 more to go, so what do you think?
I think it would have probably killed off the Avatar franchise once, for pretty much good.
Oh, really? How so?
After the critical backlash and failure of the sequel, Nickelodeon probably would think that nobody would want anything to do with the Avatar franchise anymore, and they wouldn't think that it was profitable, even though that it's not a case of people not wanting anything more from the franchise. It's because M. Night Shyamalan's adaptation sucks.
I mean, it's interesting because this movie came out in 2010, and if it would have continued on just like if it was planned, it probably would have come out in either 2011 or 2012. So, it's interesting because this isn't the only time in which Nickelodeon canceled or rejected a movie based off of Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I know that we're not supposed to talk about this because this is a TV movie, but you know what? We might as well bring it up anyway. So yeah, around 2011, Mike DiMartino and Brian Konietzko wanted to release a 90-minute TV movie called Avatar: The Search, in which it would have involved with Zuko trying to find his long-lost mother. Because if you remember from the season 3 finale, in which Zuko approaches Fire Lord Ozai in prison, and he asks him the question, "Where is my mother?" And that is, I mean, other than that just tiny little cliffhanger, the series was practically closed and finished until eventually Legend of Korra would come out. The TV movie, of course, was rejected and never came out, and then eventually it was released into the comic book adaptations of Avatar: The Last Airbender that we would have today. Because eventually the Search trilogy would be released after a few years later. So, in my opinion, for the Last Airbender movies, maybe it would have lost the interest of of Avatar. I mean, let's see. At least for the movies. As for the other adaptations, I don't know. This is a bit of a hard one to think about because, Mike and Brian would continue the Last Avatar with the comics and then with Legend of Korra. So, do you think that maybe it would have kind of, ruined the chances of those adaptations to come out if The Last Airbender 2 would have came out?
Definitely.
Oh, you think so? Oh, okay. I guess it's fair enough because
I'm just thinking from a technical standpoint, not from basically a bias standpoint. I mean, I would have loved those adaptations to come, and not for The Last Airbender 2 to be released. And even if it was and it failed, I would have still loved the other like that TV movie and The Legend of Korra to come out. But
it's kind of funny because I always think to myself that if Avatar: The Search, the TV movie, if that would have came out, as intended, like a 90-minute adaptation, I don't think Legend of Korra would have happened.
more than likely, unless it was a case of what Nick is doing now and basically making TV movies and then turning those into specials if they're successful.
Yeah, here's the thing. You see, the Avatar: The Search, it would have, told the story that we fans wanted to know for a long time. Where is Zuko's mother? And if that would have been a major success, then I wouldn't be surprised if the other stories that eventually got adapted into the comics would have been TV movies as well. And then eventually, maybe down the line, we probably wouldn't have Legend of Korra, because when Mike and Brian first pitched it to Nickelodeon, they were kind of, they wanted to reject the show because they, of course, once again, similar to the Modifiers, they wanted to not do The Legend of Korra because it had a female protagonist, and they didn't think that a show with a female protagonist wouldn't do very well, and blah, 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 blah. It's like, oh, God, are we still...
That's so sexist.
Ugh. Yeah, that is incredibly sexist, and I am just so glad that The Legend of Korra did come out just fine without that whole corporate nonsense, because, I mean, I don't know. I mean, even though that people still condemn Legend of Korra of not being as good as Avatar: The Last Airbender, and for those who were wondering, yes, it's true. The Legend of Korra is nowhere near as good as Avatar, but that was a tough act to follow. Avatar: The Last Airbender was an almost flawless masterpiece on Nickelodeon. It was already a rough thing from the start for Mike and Brian because, first Nickelodeon didn't want to do it, but then, we'll let you do it, but you have to do it in like 12 episodes. But then, the episodes became massive hit. We'll extend it for 2 more seasons. And then they had to rush season 2, which everybody says hands down is the worst season of The Legend of Korra, because it's so slow, it's so boring, and the only thing that people still remember it was, Avatar 1, who was voiced by Stephen Yeun, whom some people might know as Glenn from The Walking Dead. And, then there was that fight with Korra and her uncle when he's possessed by the evil spirit, and Korra has to fight alongside with Ravi, and then and then everything else is just really slow and frustrating with, Korra lost her memories, and then she doesn't remember about breaking up with that Mako broke up with her, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, and then seasons 3 and 4 rectified it by a lot. Like, seasons 3 and 4 are much better seasons for Korra because it introduces better villains, it introduces better characters, and then, of course, there's that 4-year time skip, and then the introduction of Toph again, so that really made things a whole lot better. So, yeah, for The Last Airbender, I think it would have just ruined the series a lot more, and possibly, we would, and maybe, Mike and Brian wanted to rectify it by releasing the TV movie. And then eventually, we wouldn't have had The Legend of Korra. So I think, in my personal opinion, but despite the movie being a massive train wreck, it reminded a lot of us that it's like what the nostalgia critic said. It's like, there's one Avatar. It was pretty much pointless to make a live action adaptation of it because, M. Night Shyamalan, it was at one of the lowest points of his career after doing movies such as, like, The Village and The Happening. So, I mean, of course nobody was going to expect him to do good, and then, with the other movie that he did later on, such as After Earth, it was like, Shyamalan, why are you even still here?
I know one of the real problems that his movies suffer. The Adam Sandler effect.
Which is that again?
Well, in the sense that, he's gotten so tied to a formula that basically nobody even cares anymore.
Okay, I see what you're getting at. Yeah, I guess you're right, because M. Night Shyamalan, when he first did movies such as The Sixth Sense, and then eventually he did Unbreakable, he was like one of the most auteur directors of all time, and a lot of people called him, he was going to be the next Steven Spielberg, because his movies were so incredibly different and unique. And then he kept relying on the same formula over and over again, elevating it to even more insanity, and then eventually people just got sick and tired of it. They just eventually moved on. And, it's like what you're right, James. It's like the Adam Sandler effect, in which, Adam Sandler did well with, his SNL skits, and now he's going to do his own movies. And a lot of the movies that he did, they pretty much sucked. Like, I mean, there were some good ones, don't get me wrong. Like, I like Happy Gilmore. I like The Wedding Singer. I like 50 First Dates. And Click has some good moments. But his other ones, such as, like, Waterboy or Jack and Jill or Me and My Boy or whatever, it's like...
That's My Boy.
That's My Boy, yeah. And just a whole bunch of others. It's like... Oh, geez, it's just getting so old. And I even saw Blended the other day with my mom, and it's like, this is 50 First Dates again. It's like, what's the point?
I looked at the preview at Blended, and I pretty much cringed. I mean, usually his movies with Drew Barrymore are actually alright.
Yeah, like, exactly, like The Wedding Singer and, like, 50 First Dates. But Blended, it just, like, reminded me, it's like, I'm watching 50 First Dates again. It's like, what's the point of me watching that? So... I could just watch the original 50 First Dates. Anyway. But yeah, I guess at that point, everybody was getting sick and tired of Shyamalan, and it wasn't helped that Shyamalan, wanted to do The Last Airbender 2, and he probably would have screwed everything up. I mean, we don't really know about what he would have done to the second book, the second Avatar movie, but... I mean, it would have been really odd, considering that the movie was on a delay for like a couple of years, and it would have been at the point in which maybe he couldn't do it anymore because the actors were already getting too old. Like, even in 2016, I think you'll have to get completely new actors in order for him to portray these characters, because the kid who played as Ong, he's no longer a young kid. He's probably, like, in his late teens, so that wouldn't probably work. So they'll probably have to get completely new actors, or maybe, they'll have to start all over. But then what's the point of that? Because both Avatar and Legend of Korra have already ended their run, and Mike and Brian are not going to be working on any new Avatar iterations anytime soon. So it's already too late for Shyamalan to do this, so...
Unless a miracle happens and maybe they'll appoint them to basically make a TV movie. But then that would finish the franchise as a whole.
Well, I mean, there really isn't any... I mean, there are more comics of Avatar: The Last Airbender that the creators are working on. And then The Legend of Korra just had its first comic released more recently. So they can already continue the story in comic book form. There's absolutely no purpose of having it theatrical unless they're able to do something completely different to it. So, yeah, at this point, I am so glad that this movie never came out, because it would have been like a massive train wreck. Considering that this movie was nominated and even won a lot of Razzies, even some critics said that this movie makes Dragon Ball Evolution look like a masterpiece there was no saving that franchise. And it's kind of funny, speaking of Dragon Ball Evolution, the guy who wrote the script for Dragon Ball Evolution publicly apologized of how much it sucked.
I agree. But they're not lying there. And saying that Last Airbender is better than Dragon Ball Evolution. You're saying that Dragon Ball Evolution is a masterpiece compared to Last Airbender. It's saying a lot, because until Last Airbender came out, Dragon Ball Evolution held the prize of being the worst live action adaptation of a cartoon ever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and don't get me wrong, there are so many live-action adaptations of cartoons that are beyond just awful. We can talk for hours about, like, I don't know, the Garfield movies, or Yogi Bear, or Mr. Magoo, or so many of them. But yeah, the fact that The Last Airbender just basically crashed and burned and everybody was making fun of it to death, I mean, it is something that nobody's going to forget anytime soon, especially in the realm of the internet where everybody's making fun of really bad movies and TV shows. I mean, even if M. Night Shyamalan continues to do well in his career, like, you know, he did well in The Visit, and he's planning on being the, you know, executive producer of the Tales from the Crypt remake. So I don't think that there's ever going to be a shadow of a doubt that they're going to stop talking about him directing and writing the worst Nickelodeon movie of all time. All right, so any final words to say right before we go?
Not really.
Yeah, let's stop right now. So tune in next time as we're going to be concluding Nicksmissal 3 with talking about a movie that started off as a rumor, but then became confirmed, and then became shot down again by Nickelodeon. So see you next time.
Alright, season.
So why does no one like me? You never invite me to war. And I wish you would send me my